Have you ever stopped long enough to confront the unsettling possibility that the life you are living right now is not the result of fate, luck, or the behavior of others, but the exact reflection of the thoughts you have allowed to dominate your mind, especially in the quiet moments when no one was watching and nothing was demanding your attention? If that question reaches you deeply, it is because Napoleon Hill understood something most people never dare to face, that success or failure is not imposed from the outside, but assembled from the inside, thought by thought, habit by habit, night after night, until it becomes so familiar it feels inevitable. Most people sleep through their lives while awake and only wake up when they lie down at night. And even then, their minds remain noisy, undisciplined, wandering, replaying fear, doubt, and limitation, as if rehearsing a future they claim they do not want. Abundance is not something you stumble into. It is something you tune into. Hill taught that the mind is not merely a passive receiver of experience, but an active broadcasting station, constantly sending signals that shape what it attracts. Every dominant thought becomes a frequency. Every emotionally charged belief becomes a command. And the subconscious mind, blind to reason but obedient to repetition and feeling, carries out those commands with relentless precision. Most people say they want abundance, but their inner dialogue is filled with hesitation. They speak of possibility while emotionally rehearsing failure. They imagine success briefly, then immediately counter it with doubt. This internal contradiction creates mental static. The subconscious does not act on mixed instructions. When the signal is unclear, it defaults to safety, familiarity, and repetition of the past. This is why so many lives repeat themselves with painful accuracy. Hill believed that the greatest tragedy is not lack of opportunity, but lack of definiteness of purpose. A mind without a clear aim becomes a playground for fear, suggestion, and external influence. It drifts, and drifting is not inactivity. Drifting is movement without direction, effort without alignment, energy without outcome. A drifting mind absorbs the beliefs of its environment and mistakes them for truth. As you begin to relax now, understand this clearly. The state you are entering is not escape. It is access. When the body slows and the conscious mind loosens its grip, the subconscious becomes receptive. This is the gateway Hill spoke of, the moment when autosuggestion becomes powerful, when ideas planted take root without resistance. This is where abundance is either invited or rejected. Autosuggestion is not wishful thinking. It is the deliberate feeding of the subconscious with emotionally charged ideas repeated with calm authority. The subconscious does not question logic. It does not analyze probability. It accepts what is impressed upon it repeatedly and then organizes behavior, perception, and reaction to make that impression real. This process operates whether you use it consciously or not. The only difference is whether you are the author or the victim. Consider how many times you have unknowingly used autosuggestion against yourself. Every complaint rehearsed internally, every fear replayed emotionally, every moment of self-doubt allowed to linger. These were not harmless thoughts, they were instructions. And the subconscious, faithful and literal, responded by shaping a life that matched them. Hill taught that faith is not blind belief, but a mental state developed through repetition. Faith is learned, fear is learned, confidence is learned, scarcity thinking is learned, and anything learned can be replaced. The mind is plastic. It reshapes itself according to dominant patterns of thought and emotion. What feels permanent is often just familiar. As your breathing slows, imagine what would happen if the thoughts you impressed upon your mind tonight were not random, not fearful, not borrowed from the past, but chosen deliberately. Imagine if the dominant impression carried into sleep was certainty rather than worry, direction rather than confusion, calm authority rather than desperation. The subconscious would begin adjusting behavior automatically, without struggle, without force. Abundance begins internally as order of thought, order of desire, order of decision. Hill believed that success is the result of a mind brought into harmony with itself. A divided mind is weak no matter how talented it is. A unified mind becomes powerful even with modest resources. Power does not come from intensity, it comes from coherence. Burning desire is the spark that initiates this coherence, not casual wanting, not vague wishing. Burning desire is emotional intensity refined by clarity. It is desire that refuses to negotiate with limitation. Most people fear this level of desire because it exposes them to disappointment. So they dilute it, they make it safe, and in doing so, they remove its power. The subconscious responds only to desire backed by emotion. Weak desire produces weak results. Strong desire reorganizes the entire mental system around its fulfillment. When desire becomes dominant, it crowds out doubt. It narrows focus. It strengthens persistence. Hill observed that those who achieved greatness were not necessarily more intelligent, but they were more emotionally committed to their purpose. Fear is the great counterforce. Fear of poverty, fear of failure, fear of criticism. These fears do not protect you. They paralyze you. Hill identified fear as a state of mind induced by negative thought. Fear grows through repetition and emotional rehearsal. It shrinks when exposed to reason and replaced deliberately. Fear survives indecision. It dissolves when decisions are made firmly. Decision is the turning point of abundance. When you decide, you tell the subconscious which future to build toward. Indecision keeps all futures hypothetical and therefore powerless. Hill found that successful people decide quickly and hold their decisions firmly. Unsuccessful people hesitate, delay, and revise endlessly, mistaking caution for intelligence. As you lie here listening, the mind begins to recognize patterns. It notices how often fear has been obeyed without question, how often hesitation has been justified, how often comfort has been chosen over growth. This awareness is not meant to judge you, it is meant to wake you up. Imagination is awakening now as well. Imagination is not fantasy. It is the blueprint of reality. Every achievement began as an image held in the mind before it existed in form. Hill distinguished between undisciplined imagination, which escapes reality, and disciplined imagination, which constructs it. Abundance requires disciplined imagination guided by purpose. You may have been taught to suppress imagination, to distrust it, to call it unrealistic. Hill taught that imagination is the most powerful faculty you possess when harnessed correctly. It is the bridge between thought and reality. But imagination without discipline becomes illusion. Discipline anchors imagination to action. Self-discipline is not harshness, it is mastery. It is the ability to choose your thoughts rather than react to them, to direct emotion rather than be driven by it, to persist when comfort tempts retreat. Hill believed that self-discipline is the price of freedom. Without it, the mind is enslaved by impulse and circumstance. Persistence is the natural esprit, shun of faith. When belief is weak, persistence collapses. When belief is strong, persistence feels inevitable. Hill emphasized that persistence is not blind repetition. It is intelligent endurance. It adapts methods without abandoning purpose. It interprets obstacles as feedback, not verdicts. Temporary defeat is part of the process. Hill insisted on this. Every success story he studied included moments of failure, loss, or delay. The difference was interpretation. Those who succeeded did not internalize defeat as identity. They treated it as instruction. Weak desire breaks under pressure. Burning desire intensifies. As sleep approaches, understand that abundance is not noisy. It does not rush. It does not beg. It stabilizes. The frequency of abundance is calm certainty, quiet confidence, inner order. This frequency cannot coexist with panic or desperation. It requires trust in mental law. The invisible mental forces Hill spoke of are not mystical. They are psychological laws. Thought influences emotion. Emotion influences behavior. Behavior influences environment. Environment feeds back into thought. This loop continues endlessly. The only difference between success and failure is whether the loop is directed consciously or allowed to run unconsciously. As you drift further, let the dominant impression be this: your mind is not broken. It is untrained. And training begins now, not through force, but through repetition, rhythm, and emotional alignment. Tonight, the subconscious listens. Tonight, impressions deepen. Tonight, the frequency you tune into begins shaping what you will call your future. This is not the beginning of something new. It is the removal of interference. And as interference fades, abundance finds space to enter. The mind does not suddenly change because it hears truth once. Napoleon Hill understood that repetition is the architect of belief, and belief is the architect of destiny. As the body grows heavier and the conscious mind loosens its grip, you are entering the same mental territory Hill identified as the most powerful conditioning ground of the human psyche. Here, ideas do not merely pass through awareness, they sink, they impress, they begin to reorganize the invisible structure from which behavior, emotion, and perception arise. Most people believe they are thinking, when in reality they are replaying old conversations, old fears, old disappointments. These repetitions feel personal, but they are mechanical. The mind, left undisciplined, defaults to the familiar regardless of whether the familiar is useful or destructive. Scarcity persists not because opportunity is absent, but because the subconscious is loyal to what it knows. Loyalty to the known is stronger than desire for the unknown unless desire becomes emotionally dominant. Hill observed that the subconscious mind cannot differentiate between an actual experience and one vividly imagined with emotion. This is not philosophy, it is function. The same neural pathways activate. The same emotional chemistry is released. The same behavioral tendencies are reinforced. When you repeatedly imagine failure, loss, or rejection with feeling, you are training the subconscious to expect and reproduce those outcomes. When you imagine success with calm certainty, you are training it to recognize, pursue, and create conditions that align with that image. This is why falling asleep in a state of fear is so destructive. The last dominant impressions before sleep are carried directly into the subconscious without resistance. Night after night, these impressions accumulate, shaping temperament, expectation, and behavior. Hill emphasized that most people sabotage themselves unconsciously at night, undoing during sleep whatever effort they make during T-Day. They work toward abundance by daylight and rehearse scarcity by darkness. Abundance begins when this cycle is interrupted deliberately. When you choose what the mind will dwell on as it enters rest. This choice is not dramatic, it is quiet, it is firm, it is repetitive. Over time, the subconscious stops resisting and begins accepting this new pattern as normal. Faith grows in this environment, not emotional hype, not blind optimism, but settled conviction. Hill defined faith as a state of mind that may be induced by autosuggestion. In other words, belief is trained. The mind learns what to expect based on what it repeatedly hears, imagines, and feels. If you tell the mind often enough that effort leads to reward, that persistence produces results, that you are capable of learning and adapting, it begins acting as if those things are true. The tragedy is that most people train themselves in the opposite direction. They reinforce helplessness. They rehearse excuses. They emotionally relive past defeats. Over time, the subconscious accepts limitation as identity, and once limitation becomes identity, behavior aligns to protect it. Hill was relentless on this point. Identity is not fixed, it is programmed. And programming can be changed through disciplined repetition, but change requires consistency. The subconscious does not respond to occasional effort, it responds to rhythm. Rhythm is repetition over time. The rhythm of thought, the rhythm of emotion, the rhythm of expectation. When a new rhythm is established, the old one weakens. Scarcity thinking loses intensity because it is no longer reinforced. Fear weakens because it is no longer rehearsed. Confidence strengthens because it is practiced. This is why abundance feels unnatural at first. The mind resists it not because it is false, but because it is unfamiliar. The subconscious defends the familiar earthly. It does not care whether the familiar is painful. It cares whether it is known. Growth always feels foreign before it feels natural. As you rest here, allow yourself to notice how often the mind tries to wander back to old narratives. This is not failure. This is conditioning revealing itself. Each time you gently redirect attention back to certainty, purpose, and calm confidence, you weaken the old pattern and strengthen the new one. No force is required. Force creates resistance. Calm repetition creates acceptance. Hill emphasized definiteness of purpose because purpose organizes repetition. Without purpose, repetition becomes scattered. With purpose, repetition becomes powerful. A definite purpose gives the subconscious a clear target. It begins filtering information, adjusting behavior, and influencing perception to support that target. Most people believe purpose must be grand or dramatic. Hill disagreed. Purpose must be definite, not impressive. Clear, not complicated. When purpose is vague, effort dissipates. When purpose is clear, effort accumulates. Abundance is the byproduct of accumulated effort directed by purpose. It is not the reward for intensity. It is the outcome of consistency. Hill studied men who worked steadily for years without recognition, only to experience sudden breakthroughs. Those breakthroughs were not sudden internally. They were the visible result of long-term mental alignment. Fear often intensifies just before alignment solidifies. This is because the old identity senses displacement. Fear is not always a warning. Sometimes it is a signal that growth is occurring. Hill taught that fear loses power when interpreted correctly. Instead of asking what fear is trying to prevent, ask what fear is trying to protect. Often it is protecting an old identity that no longer serves you. Fear thrives on vagueness. It dissolves under C. This is why decision is such a powerful antidote. When you decide, fear loses its playground. Indecision gives fear room to multiply. Decision collapses uncertainty into action. Hill observed that decisive people experience less fear, not because they are braver, but because their minds are unified. A unified mind does not argue with itself. It moves, and movement builds confidence. Confidence reinforces faith. Faith sustains persistence. Persistence is not grinding effort. It is refusal to quit mentally. Many people quit internally long before they stop acting. They continue going through motions without belief. The subconscious senses this and withdraws support. True persistence is mental continuity. It is holding the image of success steady despite temporary contradiction. Temporary defeat is inevitable. Hill emphasized this because misunderstanding defeat destroys more people than defeat itself. Defeat becomes permanent only when it is accepted as final. The persistent mind treats defeat as adjustment. It extracts information without internalizing failure. As your breathing deepens, the nervous system shifts into receptivity. This state supports learning at a deeper level. Hill's entire philosophy was built on the idea that the mind can be trained just as the body can. But training requires repetition in the right state. Calm focus accelerates learning. Anxiety blocks it. This is why abundance cannot coexist with chronic tension. Tension signals danger. Danger narrows perception. Narrow perception misses opportunity. Calm signals safety. Safety allows creativity. Creativity generates solutions. Solutions produce value. Value attracts reward. Value creation is the true source of abundance. Money follows value. Hill was clear on this. He rejected schemes, shortcuts, and speculation without contribution. Abundance earned through value is stable because it rests on utility. When you focus on becoming more useful, more skilled, more capable, abundance becomes a consequence rather than a chase. The subconscious supports whatever direction it believes is essential for survival or identity. When you associate value creation with identity, behavior aligns effortlessly. You seek learning. You endure difficulty. You persist through boredom. These actions feel natural because they reinforce who you believe yourself to be. Identity is shaped at night as much as during the day. The impressions you accept while falling asleep become tomorrow's tendencies. This is why Hill insisted on controlling the last thoughts of the day. Not forcefully, deliberately, you are not convincing yourself of something false. You are removing the mental noise that prevented clarity. Abundance does not require you to become someone else. It requires you to stop reinforcing what you are not. As the mind continues to soften, notice how urgency fades. Urgency is often fear disguised as motivation. Calm determination is stronger. It lasts longer. It does not burn out. Hill admired those who worked quietly, persistently, without drama. Their strength was internal. The frequency of abundance is steady. It does not spike and crash, it builds. Slowly at first, then unmistakably. Those who tune into it stop asking whether it is working. They continue because stopping feels wrong. Let the dominant impression now be one of inner stability, of purpose settling into place, of belief forming without strain, of discipline becoming natural rather than forced. This is how the subconscious learns. This is how identity shifts. This is how abundance begins assembling unseen. And the process continues whether you notice it or not. As the mind moves deeper into stillness, something subtle begins to surface, something most people rarely encounter because their lives are too noisy, too reactive, too crowded with borrowed opinions and inherited fears. Napoleon Hill spoke of this inner quiet not as relaxation, but as access. Access to the deeper strata of thought where causes are planted long before effects appear in the visible world. This is where destiny is negotiated silently, where habits are born before actions, where belief hardens into fact without announcing itself. Most human struggle does not come from lack of effort, but from misdirected effort driven by unconscious programs. People exhaust themselves trying to change results without ever questioning the mental patterns producing those results. Hill observed this endlessly in his research. Men worked harder, longer, more desperately, yet remained trapped because their internal alignment never changed. They fought the surface while the root remained untouched. The subconscious mind does not respond to force. It responds to agreement. It accepts ideas that feel consistent with identity and rejects those that feel foreign. This is why affirmations fail when they are spoken without emotional congruence. The words say abundance, but the identity whispers scarcity. The subconscious listens to the whisper, not the shout. Hill understood that before abundance can become a condition, it must become familiar. Familiarity breeds acceptance. Acceptance breeds expectation. Expectation influences behavior so subtly that it feels like intuition. This is why some people seem naturally lucky. They are not lucky. Their subconscious expects favorable outcomes, so their perception and behavior unconsciously align toward opportunity. Expectation shapes attention. Attention shapes interpretation. Interpretation shapes decision. Decision shapes habit. Habit shapes destiny. This chain operates continuously, whether you are aware of it or not. The question is never whether the process active. The question is what content is feeding it. Most people feed it fear by default. Fear of loss, fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of success disguised as humility. Hill identified fear as the most expensive habit humans maintain, not because fear is always irrational, but because chronic fear distorts perception. It exaggerates risk and minimizes opportunity. It trains the mind to prioritize safety over growth, comfort over contribution. The irony is that safety pursued as an end becomes its own form of danger. A mind trained only to preserve will never expand. A life built solely around avoidance slowly collapses inward. Hill warned that drifting is not passive, it is active decay. The absence of direction does not produce neutrality, it produces regression. Drifting occurs when the mind relinquishes command of itself, when emotion overrides intention, when circumstance dictates reaction. The drifter believes life is happening to them. The disciplined mind understands life is responding to them. Control does not mean rigidity. Hill was careful to clarify this. Control means selection, choosing what thoughts are allowed to repeat, choosing which emotions are indulged and which are examined, choosing which impulses are acted upon and which are restrained. This selection process, repeated daily, builds self-discipline. Self-discipline is misunderstood as punishment. Hill saw it as alignment, the alignment of impulse with purpose. Without purpose, discipline feels oppressive. With purpose, discipline feels protective. It shields energy from waste. It preserves focus. It prevents emotional leakage into distraction. Energy is finite. Attention is limited. Every moment spent indulging fear, resentment, or doubt is energy diverted from creation. Most people live with chronic leaks they never notice. They wonder why progress feels exhausting. They do not. Realize how much power is lost internally before action even begins. Hill emphasized emotional mastery because emotion fuels thought. Thought energized by emotion becomes belief. Belief repeated becomes identity. Identity dictates behavior. If emotion remains uncontrolled, thought cannot remain focused. If thought cannot remain focused, purpose dissolves. The disciplined mind does not suppress emotion, it studies it. It asks what emotion is signaling and whether that signal serves the chosen direction. Fear, when observed calmly, often reveals attachment to comfort. Anger often reveals wounded pride. Envy reveals suppressed desire. These emotions are not enemies, they are data. Hill believed that every negative emotion could be transmuted into constructive energy if understood rather than resisted. Sexual energy, ambition, anger, frustration all contain intensity. Intensity is raw power. Left undirected, it becomes destructive. Directed intelligently, it becomes fuel. Transmutation requires imagination. This is why Hill placed imagination at the center of success. Imagination is not fantasy. It is the workshop of possibility. It allows the mind to rehearse outcomes before they exist, to experience success emotionally before it appears physically. This rehearsal trains expectation. Imagination bridges the gap between desire and belief. Desire without imagination remains abstract. Imagination gives desire form. Form invites emotion. Emotion signals importance to the subconscious. The subconscious then mobilizes resources accordingly. Most people use imagination unconsciously to rehearse failure. They visualize conversations going wrong, outcomes collapsing, efforts being wasted. They do this repeatedly, emotionally, convincingly. Then they wonder why confidence erodes. They are practicing defeat. Hill insisted that imagination must be harnessed deliberately, not occasionally, but habitually. The mind rehearses something regardless. The choice is whether it rehearses progress or retreat. As the conscious mind relaxes further, the barrier between intention and impression thins. This is the state Hill described as most receptive to autosuggestion. Autosuggestion is not repetition alone. It is repetition combined with feeling. Words spoken without feeling remain superficial. Words felt become commands. This is why exhaustion sometimes precedes breakthrough. When the conscious mind loosens its grip, the subconscious becomes more accessible. The mind becomes teachable. But this teachability can be exploited negatively or cultivated positively. Most people collapse into distraction. Hill advised intentional input. What you listen to, imagine, and emotionally accept during these moments becomes tomorrow's tendency. Tendencies accumulate into character. Character attracts circumstance. The invisible mental forces Hill spoke of are not mystical. They are psychological laws operating quietly. Dominant thoughts seek expression. Consistent beliefs look for confirmation. Persistent desires influence perception. This influence is so subtle it feels external. When opportunity appears, the prepared mind recognizes it. The unprepared mind dismisses it. This is why two people can encounter the same situation and experience completely different outcomes. One sees risk, the other sees possibility. Their internal conditioning filters reality. Hill observed that abundance-minded individuals do not chase money obsessively. They focus on building capacity. They ask how they can become more valuable, more skilled, more necessary. Money flows toward necessity. Scarcity follows dependence. Dependence weakens the mind. It trains expectation of rescue rather than creation. Independence begins internally. Before financial independence comes mental dependence. The ability to think without permission, to decide without consensus, to persist without applause. Most people crave validation because they doubt internally. Hill taught that faith eliminates the need for external reassurance. Faith does not require evidence beforehand, it generates evidence afterward. This is why pioneers are rarely understood until after they succeed. Faith is not stubbornness, it is flexibility anchored to purpose. The faithful mind adjusts methods without abandoning goals. The doubtful mind abandons goals at the first sign of resistance. Resistance is inevitable. Hill emphasized this relentlessly. Every worthwhile pursuit encounters opposition. Opposition is not a signal to stop. It is a test of definiteness. Weak desire evaporates under pressure. Strong desire intensifies. Burning desire is not emotional excitement. It is sustained commitment. It persists when enthusiasm fades. It remains when results delay. It survives boredom, criticism, and uncertainty. Hill found this quality present in every enduring success. Desire weakens when purpose is borrowed, when goals are chosen to impress rather than fulfill, when ambition is shaped by comparison rather than conviction. The subconscious senses inauthenticity and withdraws energy. Authentic purpose energizes effortlessly. It pulls rather than pushes. Even during difficulty, it feels meaningful. This meaning sustains persistence. As the body rests, allow the mind to settle into this understanding. Abundance is not a reward granted by circumstance. It is a response elicited by alignment. Alignment of thought, emotion, decision, and action toward a definite end. This alignment does not require perfection. It requires continuity. Missing a day does not destroy progress. Abandoning direction does. Hill warned against perfectionism disguised as discipline. Rigidity fractures persist. Consistency builds it. The subconscious learns through patterns, not isolated events. Every night you return to clarity strengthens the pattern. Every time you redirect thought strengthens authority. Authority over thought precedes authority over circumstance. Authority is quiet. It does not announce itself. It expresses through calm decision, steady effort, and emotional balance. Others feel it without understanding it. Opportunities respond to it. This is the frequency of abundance. Not excitement, not urgency, not desperation, but grounded certainty. The certainty that effort compounds, that learning accumulates, that direction clarifies with movement. As sleep approaches more deeply, let the dominant impression be one of internal order, of scattered impulses organizing around purpose, of belief stabilizing, of fear loosening its grip. Nothing needs to be forced. The mind knows how to organize when given clear instruction and calm repetition. This is its nature. The process continues beneath awareness, thought by thought, pattern by pattern, quietly assembling the structure from which tomorrow will emerge, and tomorrow will reflect what is being accepted now. As consciousness drifts further inward, the mind begins to loosen its attachment to surface identity, the roles it plays, the labels it has inherited, the stories it repeats to explain itself. Napoleon Hill understood that this loosening is not loss, but access. Access to the deeper command center where habits are authorized, where emotional reactions are approved or denied, where the direction of a life is quietly set long before events unfold. This is the level where real change occurs, not through struggle, but through reorientation. Most people believe their personality is fixed because it feels consistent. Hill saw this consistency not as fate, but as conditioning. Repeated thoughts carve grooves. Repeated emotions deepen them. Over time, these grooves feel like identity. But identity is not essence, it is pattern, and patterns can be rewritten. The difficulty is not in changing behavior, but in changing the internal authority that approves behavior. The subconscious mind acts like a gatekeeper. It does not ask whether a thought is true, it asks whether it is familiar. Familiar thoughts are allowed to pass. Unfamiliar ones are questioned, resisted, or ignored. This is why new disciplines feel unnatural at first. The mind is not rejecting improvement, it is defending continuity. Hill taught that continuity without direction is decay. Growth requires disruption of old patterns, but disruption must be gentle enough to be accepted. Force triggers resistance. Consistency dissolves it. This is why Hill emphasized persistence as a mental posture rather than a physical grind. Persistence is the decision to remain aligned even when emotion fluctuates. Most people quit mentally long before they quit physically. They continue actions without conviction, hoping momentum will carry them, but the subconscious senses hesitation. It withdraws energy. Progress slows. Frustration increases. Eventually, effort collapses. The persistent mind does not argue with temporary conditions. It does not dramatize delay. It understands that results lag behind alignment. This understanding removes panic. Panic is destructive because it signals distrust. Distrust fractures faith. Faith is the stabilizer that allows effort to compound. Hill defined faith as a state of mind that can be cultivated deliberately. not inherited, not accidental, cultivated. This cultivation requires emotional regulation. Emotion is the amplifier. Thought without emotion is weak. Emotion without direction is chaotic. Faith is emotion disciplined by purpose. Fear is emotion undisciplined by understanding. It thrives in ambiguity. It feeds on imagined futures without context. Hill observed that fear collapses when examined calmly, not because danger disappears, but because proportion returns. Fear magnifies obstacles and minimizes capability. Calm reverses this distortion. The disciplined mind does not deny fear. It interrogates it, what is being threatened: comfort, identity, ego, security. These are understandable attachments, but they are not sacred. Growth demands temporary discomfort. Hill warned that the fear of criticism alone paralyzes more potential than any external obstacle. The need for approval is a form of dependence. Dependence weakens initiative. Initiative is the outward expression of internal permission. When the mind grants itself permission to act without consensus, power returns. This permission is not arrogance. It is responsibility. Responsibility for choosing direction and accepting consequence. Hill emphasized decision because decision collapses possibility into movement. Indecision drains energy because it keeps the mind suspended between alternatives. Suspended energy decays into anxiety. Anxiety erodes confidence. Confidence is essential because it sustains effort when feedback is delayed. Delayed feedback is inevitable. Hill studied this pattern repeatedly. Effort precedes evidence. The undisciplined mind demands immediate confirmation. The disciplined mind understands compounding. Compounding requires time. Time requires patience. Patience requires faith. This is why abundance is rare. Not because opportunity is scarce, but because patience is uncommon. Most people abandon direction prematurely, not realizing how close alignment was to producing visible change. Hill called this the habit of quitting just short of victory. Victory rarely announces proximity. It often disguises itself as fatigue, doubt, or frustration, those who persist. Through this threshold experience sudden shifts that appear miraculous to observers. Hill insisted these shifts are lawful, not magical. They are the visible release of accumulated invisible effort. The invisible mental forces Hill described operate continuously. Dominant thoughts seek expression. Repeated emotions shape temperament. Temperament influences behavior. Behavior attracts response. Response reinforces belief. This loop operates whether you are conscious of it or not. To interrupt a destructive loop, the mind must be given a new anchor. Purpose serves as this anchor. A definite purpose stabilizes attention. Without it, attention scatters across impulse, distraction, and reaction. Scattered attention produces fragmented results. Purpose does not eliminate uncertainty, it organizes it. When purpose is clear, uncertainty becomes information rather than threat. The mind asks how instead of whether. This shift changes everything. Whether invites doubt, how invites creativity. Creativity is not reserved for artists. It is the mind's problem-solving function when not constrained by fear. Hill believed creativity emerges naturally when the mind feels safe to explore. Safety is internal. It is created by faith, not circumstance. When you trust your capacity to adapt, uncertainty loses its sting. Adaptability is a form of confidence. It rests on the belief that no outcome is final unless you stop responding intelligently. Hill warned against emotional extremes. Excessive excitement destabilizes focus. Excessive pessimism paralyzes it. The balanced mind maintains steady engagement. It does not require emotional highs to function. It relies on discipline. Discipline is often misunderstood as rigidity. Hill described it as intelligent restraint, the ability to delay gratification, to choose long-term reward over short-term comfort. This ability is trained, not innate. Each small act of restraint strengthens it. Sleep states are especially powerful for training because resistance is lower. The mind is less defensive. Ideas pass more easily into acceptance. This is why Hill advised reviewing purpose, affirming belief, and cultivating calm certainty before sleep. Not with strain, with quiet conviction. Conviction does not shout, it settles. It feels inevitable. The subconscious responds to inevitability. When an outcome feels inevitable internally, behavior aligns automatically. Effort becomes consistent. Persistence becomes natural. Most people try to force belief through intensity. Hill rejected this approach. Intensity without repetition burns out. Repetition without intensity ingrains deeply. Calm repetition is the most effective teacher. As the body continues to rest, notice how the mind resists less. Thoughts slow, emotional edges soften. This is the environment where identity shifts subtly, not through declaration, but through acceptance. Abundance is not introduced as something new. It is recognized as something possible, then probable, then normal. This progression cannot be rushed. Each stage requires time. The subconscious is conservative. It adopts new identities cautiously, but once adopted, it defends them fiercely. This is why those who truly internalize abundance rarely revert to scarcity thinking. Their identity has changed. Identity governs standards. Standards govern behavior. Behavior governs results. When standards rise internally, external discipline becomes easier. You no longer negotiate with impulses that violate identity. You simply decline them. Hill emphasized self-respect as foundational. Not ego, but respect for one's word, one's commitments, one's direction. Self-respect grows when actions align with intentions. Alignment builds trust. Trust builds confidence. Confidence attracts cooperating. People respond differently to those who are internally aligned. Opportunities appear not because the world changes, but because perception sharpens. The aligned mind notices what was always there. This is the subtlety most people miss. The world does not suddenly become generous. The mind becomes receptive. Receptivity is not passivity. It is readiness. Readiness is cultivated through preparation, through learning, through practice, through reflection. Hill admired those who prepared quietly without assurance of reward. Preparation is faith in action. Faith without action is fantasy. Action without faith is exhaustion. Abundance requires their union. As rest deepens, allow this union to feel natural. Purpose present without strain. Belief present without force. Discipline present without harshness. Nothing needs to be achieved right now. This is not effort time. This is imprinting time. The subconscious is absorbing patterns, calm certainty, steady direction, emotional balance. These patterns will express themselves later as decisions that feel obvious, actions that feel natural, opportunities that feel timely. The conscious mind may not remember this moment. The subconscious will, and it will respond accordingly. As the boundary between waking and sleep grows thinner, the mind enters a space where it is no longer defending itself against possibility. This is the territory Napoleon Hill spoke of with the greatest respect, because here the inner conversation becomes law. What is accepted here is not debated later. It is acted upon. It becomes inclination, tendency, impulse. This is where the direction of a life is quietly confirmed. Most people underestimate how much of their future is decided when they are not consciously trying to decide anything at all. Hill observed that human beings are shaped less by dramatic moments and more by repeated internal states. The way a person consistently feels about effort, struggle, reward, and self-worth determines how they behave when no one is watching. And behavior when no one is watching determines destiny. The illusion most people live under is that success requires constant intensity. Hill knew the opposite was true. Success requires constancy. Intensity spikes and collapses. Constancy compounds. The subconscious does not respond to emotional bursts. It responds to steady signals. Calm certainty repeated over time builds far more power than excitement that burns out. This is why so many people feel exhausted by their own ambitions. They are trying to force outcomes instead of aligning causes. They fight themselves internally, demanding belief before it has been cultivated, demanding confidence before it has been earned through consistency. This internal conflict drains energy long before action begins. Hill taught that harmony within the mind is more important than effort in the world. A divided mind leaks power. One part wants progress, another wants safety. One wants growth, another wants approval. Until this division is resolved, progress feels heavy. When alignment occurs, effort feels lighter even when the work is harder. Alignment does not mean the absence of doubt. It means doubt no longer has authority. The disciplined mind allows doubt to exist without allowing it to decide. This is a critical distinction. Many people believe they must eliminate doubt to move forward. Hill taught that movement itself weakens doubt. Action clarifies belief. Belief is not a prerequisite for action. It is a result of action taken consistently in one direction. Each small act of follow-through strengthens self-trust. Self-trust accumulates quietly. Eventually it becomes confidence. Confidence then feeds belief. Belief reinforces persistence. The cycle sustains itself. This is why Hill emphasized decision so strongly. Decision initiates motion. Motion generates feedback. Feedback refines direction. Without decision, the cycle never begins. Indecision keeps the mind suspended, draining energy through endless evaluation. Evaluation feels intelligent, but prolonged evaluation is often disguised fear. Fear of choosing wrong, fear of loss, fear of regret. Hill observed that regret comes more often from inaction than from action. Action can be corrected. Inaction calcifies. The subconscious respects courage expressed through movement, not perfection expressed through planning. When you act, even imperfectly, the subconscious updates its assessment of your capability. It begins to support you rather than protect you. Protection feels like procrastination. Support feels like momentum. Momentum is misunderstood. It is not speed, it is continuity. Doing the next right thing without restarting the internal debate. Each time you avoid restarting the debate, you conserve energy. Conserved energy becomes available for creativity, learning, and resilience. Hill studied individuals who endured long periods without visible reward. What distinguished them was not optimism, but internal stability. They did not constantly question their direction. They adjusted methods, but the aim remained fixed. This fixed aim anchored their emotional state. A fixed aim reduces emotional volatility. When the mind knows where it is going, temporary setbacks lose their power to destabilize. They become obstacles to navigate rather than verdicts to interpret. This shift preserves emotional energy. Emotional energy is currency. It funds persistence. Those who waste it on resentment, comparison, and self-pity bankrupt themselves internally. Those who guard it through discipline and purpose accumulate power invisibly. Hill warned against comparison because it fractures focus. C. Comparing progress invites discouragement or arrogance, neither of which supports growth. The only comparison that matters is between current behavior and chosen standards. Standards elevate behavior quietly. Standards are internal agreements, agreements about what you tolerate, what you pursue, what you refuse to compromise. When standards are vague, behavior drifts. When standards are clear, discipline strengthens. The subconscious enforces standards once they are accepted as identity. If you see yourself as someone who finishes what they start, quitting feels unnatural. If you see yourself as someone who learns continuously, stagnation feels uncomfortable. Identity does the work discipline once struggled to do. Identity change is gradual. It does not announce itself. One day you simply notice that old temptations no longer feel tempting. Old fears no longer feel convincing. Old excuses no longer feel satisfying. This is not suppression, it is evolution. Hill emphasized patience because identity cannot be rushed. Attempts to force transformation often backfire, creating resistance. The subconscious adopts new identities through exposure and repetition. Calm exposure, repeated evidence. Evidence is created through small, consistent actions aligned with purpose. These actions may seem insignificant day to day. Over time, they accumulate into undeniable proof. Proof reshapes belief. Belief reshapes identity. This is the long path Hill respected most. The path without shortcuts. The path that does not rely on luck, timing, or external validation. The path built on internal law. Internal law does not negotiate. It responds consistently. Thought plus emotion repeated equals belief. Belief plus action repeated equals habit. Habit plus persistence equals character. Character determines destiny. Destiny, in Hill's framework, is not fate. It is direction sustained over time. Change direction and destiny changes. But change must be sustained. Momentary shifts do nothing. Consistent alignment does everything. As sleep deepens, the mind becomes more receptive to this truth. Abundance is not a sudden arrival. It is a gradual becoming. Those who rush miss it. Those who endure embody it. Endurance is quiet strength. It does not complain. It does not dramatize effort. It simply continues. Hill found that endurance is strengthened by meaning. When effort feels meaningful, fatigue becomes manageable. Meaning is created by purpose. Purpose transforms sacrifice into investment. Without purpose, sacrifice feels like loss. With purpose, sacrifice feels temporary and strategic. This is why Hill insisted that a person must know what they want, not vaguely, but definitively. Vague wants produce vague effort. Definitive purpose produces focused energy. Focused energy produces results. The subconscious is drawn to clarity. It organizes around it. When purpose is clear, distractions lose appeal. Procrastination weakens. Resistance softens. Notice how rest now feels heavier, deeper. This heaviness is not loss of awareness. It is release of resistance. The mind is no longer scanning for threat. It is accepting instruction. Instruction does not need to be complex. Simplicity ingrains more deeply. Calm certainty, steady effort, patience, discipline. These ideas repeated become orientation. Orientation determines how you move through the world, how you interpret events, how you respond to challenge. Two people can face the same difficulty. One grows stronger. One collapses. The difference is orientation. Hill believed orientation could be trained. This training does not occur through lectures alone. It occurs through lived repetition, through choosing response over reaction, through choosing direction over drift. Drift is seductive because it feels easy, but ease without direction leads to stagnation. Growth requires friction. Friction is not failure, it is feedback. Feedback informs adjustment. Adjustment improves method. Improved method sustains progress. Progress reinforces belief. Belief stabilizes emotion. The system strengthens. This system is being reinforced now, quietly, without effort, without force. The subconscious is assembling a new default orientation. You may not notice it immediately. That is normal. The most powerful changes occur unnoticed until they are undeniable. Tomorrow, decisions may feel slightly clearer, resistance slightly weaker, focus slightly steadier. These are signs of alignment forming. Do not rush to analyze them. Analysis can disrupt integration. Trust the process Hill outlined. Repetition, consistency, patience. The mind knows how to reorganize when given clear direction and calm repetition. This is not something to manage consciously. It unfolds naturally. Allow rest to deepen. Allow instruction to settle. Allow the internal structure of abundance to continue forming. The work is happening beneath awareness, and it will continue. There is a moment, quiet and uncompromising, when the mind can no longer pretend it does not know. Napoleon Hill wrote for this moment, not for entertainment, not for comfort, but for the instant when understanding hardens into responsibility. That moment is now. Everything that has settled into you through repetition, through stillness, through disciplined attention has brought you here. This is the threshold where knowledge either becomes power or turns into another forgotten echo. Most lives never reach this point because it demands something rare, the willingness to stop negotiating with oneself, the willingness to accept that no force outside the mind has been orchestrating delay, confusion, or limitation. Hill was relentless, Abu. See this. He did not soften it. He did not excuse it. He stated plainly that the dominant thoughts you permit, the emotions you indulge, and the decisions you avoid are the architects of your condition. This truth is uncomfortable only until it becomes liberating. Liberation begins the moment you accept total authorship, not partial responsibility, not shared blame, total authorship. To accept that your inner world has been shaping your outer world whether you intended it or not, that your habits of thought have been voting daily for the life you are living. and that from this point forward, every vote is conscious. Most people resist this realization because it removes the illusion of rescue. There is no dramatic event coming to save the undisciplined mind, no external authority arriving to impose clarity. Hill taught that waiting for rescue is the final act of drifting. The disciplined mind does not wait. It decides. Decision is not a feeling. It is a line drawn, a psychological boundary beyond which old behaviors are no longer negotiated. When you decide, something subtle but irreversible occurs internally. The subconscious begins reorganizing around the new command. Old excuses lose legitimacy. Old fears lose authority. Resistance may still appear, but it no longer governs direction. This is where most people falter. They mistake the presence of resistance for proof that they are not ready. Hill taught the opposite. Resistance is evidence that direction has been chosen. The old identity does not dissolve quietly. It argues, it negotiates, it attempts to regain control. This is the final test. The test is not whether fear appears. The test is whether fear decides. The disciplined mind allows fear to speak without allowing it to vote. This is mastery. Mastery is not emotional numbness. It is emotional hierarchy. Purpose at the top, fear below it. Hill emphasized self-discipline because without it, desire collapses under pressure. Desire alone is insufficient. Desire must be governed, focused, protected from dilution by distraction and indulgence. The world is designed to scatter attention. Those who do not guard it surrender power without noticing. Power is not aggression. It is consistency. It is the ability to show up aligned even when motivation fluctuates. Hill admired those who worked steadily without emotional drama. Their strength was invisible but unstoppable. They did not rely on inspiration. They relied on discipline. Discipline is built through small, repeated acts of alignment. Each time you do what you said you would do, confidence strengthens. Each time you avoid what violates your standards, self-respect grows. Self-respect compounds. Eventually, it becomes identity. And identity governs behavior effortlessly. This is the internal conquest Hill spoke of. Before money, before recognition, before achievement. The conquest of impulse, the conquest of fear, the conquest of drifting thought. Without this conquest, external success collapses or corrupts. With it, success stabilizes. Stability is what most people secretly crave. Not excitement, not chaos disguised as passion. Stability of direction, stability of effort, stability of belief. From stability, growth becomes sustainable. Hill rejected luck as an explanation because it removes responsibility. He rejected shortcuts because they bypass character. He rejected vague ambition because it produces vague results. He insisted on definiteness because the mind requires clarity to mobilize power. Definiteness of purpose is not optional. It is foundational. Without it, effort fragments. With it, effort accumulates. If your purpose remains unclear, this is the moment to confront that honestly. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. Purpose does not need to impress anyone. It needs to command you. It needs to be strong enough to pull you through boredom, resistance, and doubt. If it does not, it is not yet definite. Clarify it, strip it down, make it unmistakable. Then bind it to decision. Decide that regardless of mood, circumstance, or external opinion, you will move in its direction daily. Not dramatically, not obsessively, consistently. Hill taught that persistence is sustained intention, not endless struggle, not blind stubbornness. Sustained intention. Adjust methods as needed. Learn continuously, but do not abandon the aim. Learning is part of the discipline. The abundance-oriented mind does not cling to ignorance. It seeks skill. It increases value. It becomes useful. Money follows usefulness. Opportunity follows preparedness. Preparedness is built quietly. While others wait for confidence, you act. While others seek permission, you decide. While others drift, you align. This is not arrogance. It is responsibility. Responsibility is the price of power. If you want control over outcomes, you must accept control over inputs. Thoughts, emotions, decisions, habits, these are the inputs. The results you experience are the outputs. From this moment forward, stop speaking of circumstances as if they are separate from you. Stop describing your life as if it is happening without your participation. This language reinforces helplessness. Replace it with authorship. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not lacking potential. You are under-disciplined in one area or another. That is not condemnation. It is clarity. Clarity gives direction. Begin where you are, but do not remain there. Establish standards. Enforce them gently but relentlessly. Decide what you will no longer tolerate in your thinking. Decide what you will practice daily. Decide what you will pursue with persistence, and then act. Not tomorrow, not when conditions improve. Act now in whatever small, concrete way is available. Action breaks paralysis. Action clarifies thought. Action trains belief. Hill's philosophy was never about comfort. It was about command. Command of self first. Command of circumstance second. The frequency of abundance is not something you listen to and forget. It is something you embody through behavior, through decision, through discipline, through persistence. So now the question is no longer whether this works. The question is whether you will work it, whether you will stop consuming ideas and start enforcing them internally, whether you will stop drifting and start directing. No one is coming to do this for you. That is not a threat. It is freedom. Decide now, commit now, accept full responsibility now, and then move relentlessly, calmly, decisively. This is your life. Take command of it.